to our coaching call for the 26th of May. Wow, it goes so quickly. So we are continuing our dive into the ICS GCPs, study management, and we're talking about investigator responsibilities. And we're also discussing Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness. We're going to be talking about desire during this call. So let's start with the investigator responsibilities. We're continuing on from last week. One of the things that we really have to pay attention to is medical care for clinical trial subjects. So that's why we insist on having a qualified physician or dentist or pharmacist, depending on what country that you're in. You just want to pay attention to the regulatory laws regarding that. But we want to make sure that they are related, they are responsible for all the trial-related medical decisions. So the reason why we have medically qualified people in that therapeutic area is that they can make the right decisions for the clinical trial subjects, right? And that's why we also want them to be qualified by training and experience, because we wouldn't want a dermatologist or a podiatrist making decisions about a patient who has some gastric issues, or making decisions that should be made by the patient's gastroenterologist. So that's really important. We try to narrow it down to make sure that we are guaranteed that the patient is safe during the course of the clinical trial. And we have to make sure that there's adequate medical care that is provided. There's a reason why there is often an insistence on checking on the closest hospital where that is located, looking at the crash cart or emergency supplies at the clinical research site. All of that is related to that. So there are systems and checks that have been put in place to ensure, right? And of course, we have to make sure that we're reporting all those adverse events, that the investigator is assessing them. You know, it's not just a matter of documenting things, it's to actually see what exactly is going on with your patient, following up with them to make sure that they're okay. Now, if the clinical trial patient has their primary care physician or their PCP, then you absolutely have to make sure that they're aware that the patient is participating in a clinical trial at your facility. In many cases in clinical trials, the patient might not have been receiving care from you. So you have to make sure that they continue to have all the tools and resources that they normally would have had to ensure that they are healthy, and that if they're participating in that clinical trial, everyone who is involved in navigating and managing their healthcare is aware. And the other thing that we want to pay attention to is that if a patient decides to withdraw from a clinical trial, I mean, they don't have to really explain anything. Patients have the right to withdraw at any time. And this is really a very interesting word, because we've had situations where there are sites that are not very experienced, and so they would coerce patients to actually continue participating in the clinical trial, and you absolutely do not want that. A patient has a right to withdraw at any time during the clinical trial, and they have to continue to receive the care that is needed for them. So you can't say, oh, if you don't continue participation, we're going to not provide you the normal care that you need, or telling them something like, and these are real world scenarios, oh, while you're in this clinical trial, you're getting all this wonderful help, but if you withdraw, it's going to stop, things like that. I mean, if they choose to stop, then they choose to stop, and you have to respect their rights. You are also responsible for communicating with the IRB. So the principal investigator, and by you, I mean the investigator, you have to make sure that, you have approval from the IRB before conducting the clinical trial. You're making sure that, all the appropriate documents are being submitted, informed consent, subject recruitment material, advertisement. I mean, pretty much what your IRB or IEC rules and guidelines require for submissions. You have to adhere to that. And of course, as you're aware, you have to do your periodic reports to the IRB or IREC, okay? And of course, the investigator brochure and other similar materials also have to be submitted to the IRB. And again, we have to make sure that you keep providing updates to the IRB regarding the status of the subjects. So that's really it for this week. We are just stressing on the fact that as a principal investigator, you are responsible for this, for the clinical research side, and you have to understand what your obligations are. What do you do to run a quality clinical research trial at the investigator side? And for somebody who's in this, whether you want to become a CRA or you want to become a study coordinator, whatever it is, these are the concepts that we always want to think about. How does a clinical research side run? The principal investigator has oversight, and how does that oversight get implemented throughout the course of the trial at a clinical research facility? So let's move on to our success training for today. We are talking about Neville Goddard, the power of awareness. And this week, I want to talk about desire. Okay, in clinical trials, we desire that you, as the principal investigator, you're adhering to the regulatory rules and the ICS GCPs, right? You're maintaining adequate oversight over the clinical research side. So let's extend that to our study for today. So Neville says that the changes which take place in your life as a result of the change concept of yourself always appear to the unenlightened to be the result, not a change of your consciousness, but of chance, outer cause, or coincidence. Again, when you actively participate in the oversight process at a clinical research side, right? And you're consciously participating in that. Somebody from the outside might look and say, oh, wow, you know, this is just chance. This person has a great clinical research facility, or you're a clinical research professional, you're monitoring or you're managing projects and you're doing an amazing job. And from the outside, it might just seem that it's just a coincidence, but failing to realize that you've prepared your mind, you know, you are aware, you're conscious, you know what the regulatory laws are, but you're also very conscious of what you're doing. Therefore, make results or accomplishment the crucial test of your ability to use your imagination. So by this is that the imagination always comes first. So if I'm imagining and then the things start taking place in my life, then that's the test that whatever I'm doing is actually working. And as you know, with Neville, his big thing is that you have to think from the end. You have to think the desire within you has to be the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If you desire to own a clinical research site, to become an incredible clinical research professional, whatever it is, you have to think from the end. What would that person be like? How would they feel? Now, he says that which you will not affirm as true of yourself can never be realized by you. For that attitude alone is a necessary condition by which you realize your goal. So, if you do not believe in that which is true of yourself, an infinite being on an infinite journey, and, you know, here to expand and to grow, then you will not realize your goal, because the condition to realize your goal, to bring forth this desire, you have to be aware of the truth about yourself. Super important. Then, again, he talks about the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You have to feel it, the desire within you. You must assume this feeling of the wish fulfilled until your assumption has all the sensory vividness of reality. I love it so much. You have to immerse yourself in this feeling. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you keep doing it over and over. I always say, do it before you go to bed at night, before you close your eyes. Imagine yourself as the person that you want to be, right? And just before you drop off to sleep, you know, just imagine that and really bring up those feelings of gratitude. And right before you open your eyes, that moment when, you know, you're just about to open your eyes, bring that. And it takes practice. You do it over and over again, and it's going to work. It does work in my life. It's just practice, training your mind. And before you know it, before you go to bed at night, that's going to be the last thing on your mind. And then before you get up in the morning, it's just going to pop in there and you will actually feel it. And you must actually already be experiencing your desire. So you must imagine yourself. So you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled until you are possessed by it, and it crowds all other ideas out of your consciousness. That's what happened with my clinical trial journey, creating Achaibo Clinical. I was so clear about what I wanted to do that I visualized it. I dreamt about it. You know, I saw myself creating programs, and now I've created so many courses. But that's what it's about. You got to have it crowd your consciousness to the point where you start taking automatic action because you're so filled with this desire that, you know, I mean, whether it's recording videos or it's coaching people, it then for me it comes so naturally. Doing these calls to answer your questions, it comes so naturally because I've done it over and over and over and over again to the point where it's just who I am right now. And the mind is an interesting thing, and it always needs something. The mind is an obsessive mechanism, which is a good thing for us because when it's like a dog with a bone, if you give it an idea, and it bites on it and it doesn't want to let it go, you give it over and over again, it will look for a way to ensure that that actually comes to pass. So the man or woman who is not prepared for the conscious plunge into the assumption of the wish fulfilled in the faith that it is the only way to the realization of his dream is not yet ready to live consciously by the law of assumption, although there is no doubt that he or she does live by the law of assumption unconsciously. So basically, if you're not prepared to live consciously, you're going to keep living unconsciously. You're going to attract the events anyway, right? I mean, but you're not aware that you're attracting it. You're maybe blaming other people. Something happens in my life. I start blaming other people because I'm not living consciously. But if we're going to be here on planet Earth, this might sound woo-woo or whatever, but just try it. Try it. Just say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start living a conscious life. It might not be perfect. I might start at 20%, but I'm going to make sure that I am aware of the things that are going on in my life. And I'm going to assume the feeling of the person that I want to be on this planet. And then I'll see what happens. See yourself like an experiment. Test it out. Okay, so, there's some things that I want in my life. How would that person think or act? If I want to go on a luxurious trip, like how would that person feel or act? If I want to change careers, if I want to have my own clinical research site, if I want to go work for a pharma company, if I'm a study coordinator and I want to become a CRA or whatever it is, how would that person feel or act? And I'm going to see myself as an experiment, and I'm going to be curious to see that if I take this deep plunge into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, let me see what will happen. To reach a higher level of being, you must assume a higher concept of yourself. It is the period, the big thing, I think that, let me even go to, I think you guys, my mouth was just, sometimes my mind thinks faster than my speech because there's so much that I want to share. And just from my personal experience, and all the things that have happened. So I am where I am, and I want to get to a higher level of myself. The only way is that I have to assume the higher level of myself. I have to really sit and say, the person that I want to be, what are they like? Where do they live? What do they do? How do they think? I mean, it's a constant thing in my mind, before building a Achaibo clinical, how would the person who's running a Achaibo clinical, obviously they're constantly growing, they have a desire to help others. So I had to keep thinking about the ways that I can expand my service and really become the founder of this company and use it to help others to claim their power and give them the right information. And so for that to happen, I had to continue transforming myself. I had to think of a higher concept of myself, really spending my time productively to create the things that are going to be used for transformation of myself and others. If you do not believe that you are he or she, the person you want to be, then you remain as you are. You have to believe it. You have to know it's possible. And I have to tell you this on personal experience. I have to blink sometimes that I'm actually recording all of this because I had seen this for years and years, really helping others and getting to the point as a consultant where I'm at the global level where I can see everything that's going on. And I can look at one country and say, okay, this country, look at what they're doing. How do I take this success and coach people to do better in whatever country that they are? So that was really what I wanted to do. And it's exactly what I'm doing right now. Right. And of course, there are challenges, right? It's not an easy walk. I mean, I've most certainly had my own challenges, like all of you who are watching this. But the fact of the matter is that you got to believe in yourself. And believing in yourself, I know people often say, I'll just believe in yourself. It takes practice. It's like you're tricking your mind, right? We come on this planet, there's so many things that have happened, so much brainwashing. But then now I have to believe in myself. So what do? I meditate in the morning. I do affirmations, morning or evening, whatever. But mornings are always the best time because you're launching your day, right? So all these power activities are best done in the morning. You're rising, you're recalibrating your body and your energy. So you're doing it in the morning. And then, of course, before going to bed at night, as you're resting, you give your mind something that it's going to play with while you're actually sleeping. But you have got to believe in yourself. You have to practice, you have to do affirmations, you have to study. And that's just how it is. And somehow, through the course of all of it, you're going to start noticing that you just believe in yourself a little bit more. The confidence and the courage to keep going on in life, where does it come from? It comes from practice. You practice it over and over and over again. And then someday it's there, it comes naturally. So through the faithful, systematic cultivation of the feeling of the wish fulfilled, desire becomes the promise of its own fulfillment. Oh my goodness, I always have chills just listening and reading this line and listening to it. I have it on audio as well. So through the faithful, systematic cultivation of the feeling of the wish fulfilled, desire becomes a promise of its own fulfillment. Desire becomes the promise of its own fulfillment. So it is the desire that is that promise of its fulfillment, right? By that desire, if you keep thinking from the end and feeling that feeling, it is that feeling that becomes whatever you need. That feeling, right? It's that feeling that's going to generate everything. And he says the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled makes the future dream a present fact. So you have a desire. You think about it, you feel it, you imagine it, right? But that feeling, that's like you're going into the future. So I have a desire and I'm saying, oh, there's some things that I want to accomplish. As I'm thinking about it, I'm actually going to the future. And so what happens is this, which is so mind-boggling. When I heard this, I had like a come to Buddha, come to Jesus moment. And so when I go into the future, so I'm launching myself into the future because that dream that I have currently, right, is not in my known world. Remember, I said life is about just constantly moving from known things to unknown things, right? So I am not aware of it. I launch into the future. But when I go into the future and I feel it, but when I open my eyes and come back to the present, my present is now becoming the future because I've taken that energy of really visualizing and seeing what I want and bringing it to the present. So you come to the present, you open your eyes, you visualize, and you're going about your day, but you're already living that future because you keep, so that is the movement. You dream about your future, you open your, then you're in the present, but the future slowly now starts becoming the present. And then that's how the movement goes. And I dream again about another future, and that future now becomes my present. That's the deal. If you want, you can listen to this over and over again. And that way it makes sense to you because it did take me a while to actually visualize and get this. And I'll give you a simple example. If I want to become a clinical research professional, because this is the context in which we are, I imagine myself as that. I think about, okay, what does a clinical research professional do in whatever capacity? A doctor who owns a medical site conducting clinical research, somebody who's in medical affairs, somebody who's a clinical research associate, somebody who's a project manager, a biostatistician, a data manager. Wherever I am, I imagine that I start taking on those feelings. I'm taking on those feelings. As I'm taking it on, I come back, I am back where I am. But now, guess what happens? Because I felt it so much, my mind starts generating the conditions and circumstances. The right people start getting drawn to me. And it's a slow build. So that becomes my present. All of a sudden, I am there, right? I get led to talk to somebody at the perfect time, send out my resume at the perfect time. I get some funding at the perfect time. So it slowly starts becoming my present. And then guess what? I'm there now. And then I imagine again another future. Maybe I want to have 2 or 3 other clinical research facilities, right? So I imagine that, and then that comes to the present. So you're really bringing the future into the present. I mean, it's an illusion, of course, but you're assuming the feeling, because remember, there are two worlds. You have the vibrationary world and you have the physical world. So you just go into the vibrationary world where energy exists, where your imagination is, and because you're constantly there, then it starts becoming part of your life. That was a mouthful. I hope that makes sense. Okay. It is the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled that makes the future dream a present fact. That's what I was talking about. You assume it and it makes the dream a fact. Okay. So that's it for today. I mean, we are still continuing the investigator responsibilities, maintaining oversight over the clinical research facility, knowing that you are ultimately responsible for the safety of the clinical trial patients and the data that's coming from a clinical research site. And then we're talking about desire, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Whatever you need in your life, you gotta feel it. You gotta be that which you want to become in every way. Other exercises are writing it. I am a scripting person. I journal a lot. When I have an idea, I script it, because scripting is so powerful. And it's not just journaling. You can journal your ideas and thoughts, but you can just take a piece of paper and look at the situation and say, how would I like it to be? There was no obstacles. And then you write about it. How are you doing your engaging your spirit when you write? Your mind, your speech as well, even though it's a speaking in your mind, right? And you're also engaging touch. So that writing engages so many of your mental faculties. And so it's a great way to really channel something and put you in a state of actually feeling it. And it works. It really does work. So I thank you guys. Always a delight. We are going to continue on. There are so many other ICS GCP concepts. And by the end of this whole series, which is coming through the end of the year, I am so excited. We'll be done. We would have covered every single thing. There'll be enough material that you can use for many years and really fine-tune your skills. And remember, make sure you join the weekly Q&A calls or the monthly Q&A calls, whichever schedule that you're on, so that you can receive answers. We can be here to assist you. Remember, in addition to that, you have the Facebook group, you have our YouTube channel, you have CS at Achaibo Clinical. So really, we are here for you if you need anything, okay? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.